Good morning and welcome to our new boardroom. This is a special meeting, agenda number 26-09. And I want to thank everyone for attending and making this happen. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of reflection.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next we'll move on to roll call and acknowledgement of guests. I'll start with Dr. Flores.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Ramon Flores, trustee Area 5, which is major portions of Oxnard, El Rio, La Colonia, and Ocean View.
Arlie Kidd, Area 4, mainly Simi Valley and Mortimer.
Good morning, Richard Lucas, Area 3, parts of Cameron, parts of Oxnard, Santa Paula, Fillmore, Pyro.
Good morning, Michael Teasdale, the Canal Valley and parts of Camarillo and Opa.
And good morning, Rachel Ulrich, representing Ojai and Ventura and a little bit of North Oxnard.
Good morning, Lisa Solis Brown, Deputy Superintendent, Educational Services, and I'll go ahead and have staff introduce themselves.
Good morning, Misty Key, Deputy Superintendent.
Good morning, Joanna Delgado, Assistant Superintendent, Selma.
Good morning, Dr. Consuelo Hernandez-Williams, Associate Superintendent, Student Services.
I'll go ahead and also recognize our facilities team that are here, and also Shannon Crone, Lisa Bork, and Aurelia Roman. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I would like to call for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Lucas, seconded by trustee Teasdale. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. We move on to public comments, of which we have none. And then we go into C1, which is discussion of new standing agenda items. And I believe this is discussion action. Discussion. Discussion information action. All right. So I put this on the agenda, and we are holding this special meeting because we have a review of the LCAP, adoption of the LCAP, and adoption of the budget coming up. And I thought that these were important issues that we needed to discuss prior to adopting the budget for the next fiscal year. So with that in mind, the board members can see the new standing agenda items, and this discussion is to look at those items. Any comments, any revisions, any additions? The floor is yours. Trustees. Questions, comments? Trustee Teasdale.
Yeah, question, comment. Would these standing items be every month at our monthly meetings?
Yes, that's what I envision, just to keep updated.
Right. Would the contracts, I guess this is a question for the president as well as the staff. Report of all contracts might be a lot. Should we bid contracts over 20K or give some sort of lower platform for those contracts? I don't know the number of contracts that might be conducted in a month's time.
That's a reasonable question, and I would ask staff what would be their opinion on that.
It's whatever you would like to see. It really doesn't matter. We can provide all of them.
An idea of the amounts of, I know it varies by month, you know, I'm sure, but are there 100 contracts per month? And if so, how many are over or under 20K? I'm just looking for ballpark.
We can look into that. Unless, Lisa, do you know how many you have?
I don't know off the top of my head, but there's not 100, no.
Yeah.
And most of them are not over 20K. I mean, and when you, the language you're using, just to be clear, because a contract can be anything. A purchase order is a contract with a vendor. So, you know, it's like, item A kind of covers B and C in your list, but it's kind of, you know, we have to work out details of what you want to see. That's why I wanted to come and hear your discussion, because I'm probably going to be the one preparing the reports, and I wanted to know what the intent was and what you guys are looking at. But we probably have a couple hundred purchase orders a month, and I'm going to roughly say, depending on the time of year, because we get a lot of contracts at the beginning of the year, the first few months, and then it kind of tapers off, and you probably have 20 or 30 a month that come in, depending on what's going on.
Are most of those purchase orders the result of a contract that's been signed and paid for monthly, or does
No. Most of our purchase orders that have contracts are for like service agreements or lease agreements or things like that that are annual, that have contracts that are signed with them.
So, and you're welcome to step up because you seem like our person here. Yes, Trustee Flores.
So in my day job, I got in trouble one time, briefing a Marine Corps colonel, using the word all. And he looked at me, glared at me, and said, one, A-L-L, all. So I take that with a grain of salt. So when I hear things, report on all contracts, that is incredibly generic. I need fidelity, I need preciseness. I don't want to hear about every single purchase order that is like $1,000 or for pencils or whatever, because that falls into the category of all. So what are we getting reports on? Because I'm also mindful of staff's time. You know, I'm mindful of all the requests for documentation, blah, 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 where it was all this, all that, all this, all that. So I want specificity on this thing.
And so what would those specifics be for you?
I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper here. So I don't know, because again, I feel like we're diving into staff work. Again, I sat on a couple of nonprofit boards where we get reports on contracts, but we also have a finance committee that does a deep dive into those things. So unless this board wants to create a finance committee that's going to meet with staff, that's going to report up to us, that's the only way we're going to get the fidelity of reports of all contracts. And I don't want to go that person.
And if I may, there are reports in our system that exist because we use Escape throughout the county that all the other districts use to report to their board as it's required, right? So there's a standard report we have, not POs, it's called the PO board report, right? That's the title of the report. So it runs for all districts to use. And if I may, I mean, you can get into specifics and discuss it, but it's always open for change, right? If you get what you get and you don't like it, or you have other questions, you can change.
And then a follow-on to
Solve all the
that.
world's problems today.
A follow-up to that is, again, what is it that we're being reported? What is it that we are being given? Because again, in my nonprofit world, what I'm looking for is things like what are the period performances, what's my execution rate, what's going to be my estimated completion, am I going to get to where I need to get, you know, and then you get into complexities because not every contract is on given either academic year, fiscal year, calendar year, or whatever. There's always a bunch of overlaps. So on paper, it might seem that I'm way behind on a certain contract as far as the expenditure rate goes, but I have 2 years to still complete that contract. So that's what I'm saying. What is it that we're looking at? So that's generic question on item 1B. If we go back to item 1A, specifically Fund 5800, I personally would like staff to give an explanation of what is Fund 5800.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you last.
What's Fund 5800 in detail?
And it's non-existent. I think they mean object. 5800 is professional services. I think the intent is object, not fund.
I guess, you know, the challenge is we've had apparent violations in the ed code and spending that seems to be improper. And so we need to get greater controls. I agree with Trustee Flores that, looking at everything is a little bit too much, of course. I'm wondering if we can look at any new contracts signed during the year and any payments of over 20K in terms of purchase orders, because, every purchase order would drive me as well as probably everybody else crazy. And maybe that's a limit. And I think this is an element that is a short-term effort right now to have greater oversight, because we've had reports that have been seemingly really inaccurate to us in the past. So we've got to get a little bit closer eye on things. Whether this will help, I think we can see over the next 3 or 4 months. And other efforts we might take to get a greater vision of what's going on, because certainly there have been problems.
I think I would be a little cautious using words like what Tisa just used,
Like what, please?
what you just said.
Can you repeat my words that you disagree with, please?
Reports that, if I could paraphrase, were egregiously wrong or something to that effect.
They were certainly inaccurate, not complete. We've got disclosures to that effect. So at any rate, to me, the trust isn't there. We need to get a more closer look at what's happening. And this is a short-term effort to sort of ensure that some of these contracts we get some sort of vision on. I'm not sure it's a solution, but it's an effort.
If I may, I think that as I was listening to Dr. Flores' comment, I don't know if this board knows what we don't know. And so for me, I would rather take a little bit more cautious view and look at everything and then scale things back than not be looking at enough. So we have a better understanding of kind of the operations given the nature of the last month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the board's statutory abilities, I believe $10,000 is where notification is supposed to come to the board. But also, I gotta, looking at this, I've been looking at, my prior life, my prior job. I've been looking at school district budgets for 30 years. And you really get into how specific and how detailed you want to look at items. Because oftentimes, looking at broader items, I mean, and we'll get into it, I think, more in the next section, but, we have an independent auditor who comes in every year. Has given us a report every year. The amount of detail that the auditor looks at obviously is not as detailed, because none of, our auditor stood up and given some vague kind of cautions, but when we press for details, it's been, everything's fine, right? So, I mean, you really get into that, but to give an example too of looking at a contract, about a year ago in Burbank, and this was in the news, so it's nothing that's not out there, they discovered, they had a contract that they had all voted for, all 5 board members. It was to hire a company to catch up on the board minutes, because they were way behind, okay? So, during the year, that one employee did not do much work, to be honest. At the end of the year, when they were going to renew the contract, somebody looked deeper and found that the sole employee was also the daughter of a board member. And when they looked even deeper, it turned out the board member owned the LLC that the company owned the company, and actually owned the company. So, again, looking at, just a contract again, like they didn't go into real detail. They had to would have found out that the board member actually was violating the law. It was a conflict of interest. The board member is now facing a felony charge. He was resigned. But I'm just saying, it's an example of how deep do you want to go? Because when you look at a district's budget, you're looking at broad categories, and it's kind of like, you may have a household budget, but unless you show me your checkbook, it really doesn't tell me what you spent your money on, right? And of course, when you get into a district's budget, especially a county budget, as Trustee Flores says, when we say, oh, we're talking about a tremendous amount of data. So I think we kind of need to, think about our capacity to look at the data. I think statutory, what data we really have the direct control over versus, for example, we approved the budget, but it's a very broad budget. The courts have already undermined counties, starting down in Orange County when they voted no on a budget. It wasn't taken to the state board to approve the budget. The judge over the case threw the case out a few years later. He never ruled on it. But obviously there are things statutorily the board has a direct oversight of, and things we have broader oversight of. So I think it's kind of getting to Trustee Flores' point, like how detailed do we want it, and what exactly do we want to look at in terms of doing it? Because I got to be honest, in 30 years of looking at budgets, I've seen a lot of things go through that you don't see looking at a budget because it's not there, right? I mean, like I said, it's the difference of looking at a budget versus looking at like a checkbook. This is where did the money actually go? In a district is, county district, there's a lot of money going a lot of places because that's the business of districts.
So one, I just want to apologize for putting all in. These were items that were just put out there for discussion, so we can have this discussion in a public meeting and not violate any Brown Act laws. So these were just first drafts, if you will. So the purpose of this is to see what do we want, what the whole board wants. So it's not a, hey, I have these items down because this is what I want. Just want to be clear on that. Yes, Trustee Teasdale.
I wonder if there's a way to combine number one and elements of, C2 here. If we do bring in someone to oversee the reports of the budget to us quarterly, does it make sense to bring in that expert to give us some notion of what to look at monthly or quarterly, that is, come back with a recommendation how we can get better insight that will help us to avoid some of the misrepresentations that have happened in the past, and use that expert to help us with a way, both statutorial but also financially, to get a better insight on the budget, rather than us, using the language we have here, which is sort of broad and engenders a discussion. But find an expert who can come in, maybe help us with that. Because I am nervous about, we're dealing with a lame duck superintendent with a history of disclosures, and I think we need to get a greater insight as to what's happening, because I'm from private business. When something like this happens, that person's usually outside the door 24 hours later, and we're taking a big risk here with the lame duck person in office.
So I will just say superintendent's elected, so it's not private business.
I know that, but I'm just telling you the perspective I'm coming from.
Yeah, and so the history, by the way, is under Dr. Weiss. During his last years here as county superintendent, there were quarterly audits that the board was presented by an independent, I think they were ex-CBO, who would do these reports because there were issues between the county superintendent and the board. So there is a historical precedent for this. The standing agenda items, and I think is it Lisa? Is it Lisa? As Lisa stated, they were meant to be what just normal school boards and the community college district get at their monthly meetings. So I've never seen these because we haven't had that policy, but it happens at every school board meeting in the local districts, and I just didn't think it was, there was a reason why we shouldn't be doing that as well, as just another check and balance. So that's how these came to be. I am not the expert on any of these items.
Madam President, my kids went through the Rio District when they were going major turmoils, and I remember being in multiple board meetings as a parent, and that is one of the main items that was reviewed. It says actually that's you're actually right. It's not out of the norm. Back to Trustee Tizio's comment, that's what I was referring to about like a finance subcommittee. So having a independent auditor, someone can come and just give us a independent set of eyes, is I think would be a better approach instead of us doing a deep dive ourselves. I'm not a finance guy, as much as I love numbers. Numbers can tell you any story depending on how you want to look at it, kind of a thing. But someone who's in the field and can say, okay, this is contextual, this is what this means. And then going back to item 1C, I think that's probably tracking in a better direction, right? What fidelity, when, let's talk about any deltas over a certain dollar one, if it's 10,000 is the limit, or whatever the number happens to be, let us know if there's a contract and there's a modification over 10,000. I know in the past, Mr. Fateh is here, when we've had construction going on and there were change orders, all those change orders came to us. Sometimes they were relatively small, sometimes they were significant, but the change orders came to us for review. So if we do something like that, process is already in place, that would be fine. But again, and Madam President, I apologize, the engineering means the role, so when I heard all, that's what got my attention. I don't want all contracts.
Well, would it be useful for me to make a motion that we engage someone that would work with a finance committee that would come up with a report to us, you know, using their expertise of what would be useful rather than to Trustee Flores, that us trying to play the financial experts. You know, that we engage someone for, I would say, a next 6 months, and then we see to what extent that is useful to us, and we decide at that point whether to go forward or not.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest in that C1, new standing agenda items, we can basically state for A and B would just be what the escape report out is for normal school boards. It doesn't seem to be a drain on staff, according to Lisa, so that would be something that we could implement easily. Yeah. Is there anything else, Lisa, that you suggest? And I'm curious from your point of view and your opinion. I'd love to hear it.
Well, as I am starting my 37th year doing this, so I've had a little experience. I think what he just said is a good suggestion. That's what I would suggest to you. Let your independent auditor come and see what we're doing, and then let them make suggestions to you, because I think you're doing a very broad brushstroke on two things that aren't even captured in what you're trying to do right here. It was all salary and benefits that were alleged to be going on, and it had nothing to do with anything you're requesting here. So you wouldn't catch that anyways, and whatever's going on, and when it's happening, whatever's happening. So I know my staff's doing their job, and we're doing a good job and doing the right things. So I'm not scared to share anything with you, and I invite you to bring an auditor in to tell you if something's going on that you need to look at closer.
So does that motion make sense? Should I repeat it, to bring in an auditor for the next 6 months who would initially, you know, meet with staff to come up with a report for us? And I guess we'd also need a sort of subcommittee who would work with that auditor, or would that auditor just report to us?
I want to be specific on language. Is it auditor, capital A, auditor, lowercase a? Because we have an auditor. We have an auditor who gives us an audit report on an annual basis, so an independent...
An independent auditor, yeah.
So that would be C2, right? Oh, C2 is funding,
Yeah.
said auditor. Let's do this.
What too, though, on trustee Teasdale's motion there, I would like an opinion from our attorney on the extent, because the board does have the right to hire independent consultants, that's a right of the board. But I'd like to know from our attorney, because now we have an independent auditor working with our budget department, who is mainly under, the superintendent, whoever that is, just where, if there's a line, or if it's completely open, or not. If you know what I'm saying. In other words, I'd like to know, because the board has the right to hire consultants that work for the board. Technically, the superintendent, whoever, it is at the time, has the right to hire the people in their departments and direct their departments. So I just want to know, if we have an independent auditor go in, do they have complete access, etc., or are there any limits statutorily that we don't know about?
So again, I know from historical county office board interactions that this has gone on in the past. It's an oversight role. It's not a active role. So it's not meddling or instructing or conducting business. It's just.
But I think there is instructing our auditor what we want them to look for, because we do have an independent auditor currently who I'd be curious to ask next time she comes before us, like, what exactly are you looking at?
Well,
because in other words, we've never told that auditor, hey, take a look at these things and report back to us. So I think an auditor, we have to give specific directions to about what we're interested in, because it is such a broad, when you talk about the district's budget, it is such a broad, thick document.
yeah, for what I mentioned to that, I think I follow Trustee Flores' thought that I would like the auditor to sort of work with us in terms of what we should look at. I'm not a financial expert, and my goal would be to hire one, have her listen to our concerns and have her come back and say, this is what I think you guys need to look at, that we could then work with. Because I don't know if anybody on this panel is a financial expert. You're probably the best, having had the most experience, but even then I think having an auditor come back and say, given your concerns, here's what I think we should look at. And I think that should be a process to work with the committee and then come back to the board and with a report. This is what that individual will report out each month or each quarter, whatever rhythm makes sense to us.
All right, so here's what I think. So we can keep a record. C1, I would make a motion to have a new standing agenda item, which would be the escape reports that Lisa suggested, that we just implement as part of our regular board meetings, like the community college district does, like the local boards do. At a minimum, we'll start with that, and I think let's just tackle that. So even though there's a bunch of wording there, we're going to forget all that wording. We're going to make a motion, C1, to have a new standing agenda item, which would be, Lisa, how would we term the escape board reports? As a new standing agenda item.
Madam President, can I make a recommendation we make that a consent agenda item?
Yes, we can make that a consent. So I'll amend the motion that a new standing consent agenda item will be this escape board reports. And let's just tackle that one. So, I made the motion. If someone wants a second.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Flores. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes 5-0. Now, we can discuss hiring an independent auditor that would work for the board. Now, it's a small a. It doesn't have to be a licensed auditor. It could be an ex-CBO or a financial expert. That can be decided. And that'll be what we'll make as C2, or another, we'll kind of encompass B and C, 1B and 1C. And that can include the reports of any expenditures and fiscal commitments over 10,000. That can be something that we work with this independent person on.
What's the structure to put this into place? Do we need a finance committee?
We can have a finance committee work
To choose one?
And to work with that person and report out to the board. That's fine. Are we? Two people want to be on that committee. That would be great.
Well, this is separate from the committee that trustees Teasdale and Lucas
No,
are
it could be
currently.
the same.
What could be the same?
Yeah, be the same. Financial.
Well, I'm just asking because since they're already on that committee, is this a separate
We want
committee?
these two to.
Well, no, since they're already on it, I'm just wondering if we're talking about two different committees or if that's the same committee since they're already on it.
Yeah,
We can have two.
We could do the same committee. I'd be willing to do that because it's different. It's a different hire, but they are related. And the two need to be, one's an ongoing control and the other is an audit, a forensic audit. So they're two different, but if Trustee Richard agrees, I'm fine taking that on.
Or if one of you gentlemen want to join the party, it could be a separate committee.
Well, I mean, I'm good either way. I just wanted that defined if that's going to be their committee or if we're talking about creating a second.
I'm fine incorporating that into our committee if that works for everybody.
And what I'm saying is I don't want to leave you two.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying just for continuity, if we already have two trustees doing that. Two, there's something else I would not recommend a former CBO as the auditor because in my experience about half of the CBOs know their budget and Misty Key is one of those who knows her budget. But in my career I've run into about half who don't know their budget because they don't do the budget work. Somebody in their department does all the budget work. So I would make sure it's someone who actually, and I know that sounds funny, but I've been at hundreds of bargaining tables over the years, and I can tell if a CBO knows their budget after 5 questions, and half do and half don't. So I would really caution about a retired CBO because they may or may not know what they're looking for, and they may be more had an administrative role of directing other people to do that work. So I would caution on that.
That makes a lot of sense, completely understand that.
So with that, someone have a motion?
I motion that the existing ad hoc committee to hire a forensic auditor add to its mandate of hiring of a audit for ongoing operations.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for our current ad hoc committee of Trustee Lucas and Trustee Teasdale that in addition to hiring a forensic auditor, that they will also engage a ongoing, what are we going to call them?
Ongoing auditor of financial transactions.
So we have a first and a second. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. So we have that. Okay.
I do have a question for staff. How much does the current auditor charge per year for the work that she does?
It's a complete team that they have of 3 to 4 people, and it costs around $48,000 to $50,000 a year.
$48,000 to $58,000. When they come into the department, how long are they there?
They come twice a year, and they spend about 3 days here, 3 days in the spring, 3 days in September to finalize the audit, and then they do many hours back at their office, and we do a lot of online stuff.
When they come in, are they looking at basically the broad numbers or detail?
Independent auditors are given direction through the CDE on what they're supposed to look at and what their standards are. We don't control any of that. So they are told what the specific programs they should look at, if there's specific programs that the CDE wants them to look at. Otherwise, they do broad samples of everything. They have access to Escape in our district, and they look up whatever they want. They can look up backup to POs. They can look up any backup to journal entries, anything they want. And they test. They do reasonable testing, so they test a certain percentage of transactions, and if they find errors in there, they test more. If there's not a lot of errors, they can stop their testing and make their assumptions. That's the whole scope of what an auditor does on most big cases, any case that way. Yeah.
From what I understand, the auditor is going to go and do sampling. You know, it doesn't look at every transaction, I mean, or the cost would be in the millions, so it samples. Does test by going down to the detail.
And then if they find errors, they extend that sampling.
Right.
And if they don't, then, yeah, correct.
And from what I gather, and I'm not sure for the type of audits we do, but we'll talk about this as we move towards talking about money, we're looking at about 2,000 or more per audit person day is what I've found to be a rough, if not lower end estimate of what an auditor costs. About 2,000 per day, per audit.
Which then leads us to C2, which is discussion of budget items to ensure the board has funding for these consultants. And I believe that everyone was presented with the board fund from 24, 25, and 25 and 26. And we have expenses. They're just numbered. So my question was one of what each of those numbers represents.
Well, Madam President, if I could ask the first question, what's the difference between actuals with income and actuals without income? How would you define that?
The word is encumbrance, so it's the anticipated expenditure that has yet to happen, but we know it's going to happen.
So the most accurate number would be, you know, the bigger one that is the total either anticipated or actual expenditures under that budget item. Am I correct?
There's only two different sets of data on here. So the first one, BR means budget for 24-25. The next column for 24-25 is the actual expenditures with encumbrances, which 24-25 is long closed and over, so it's just the total that was spent.
So the 290 is, let's say for 24-25, the 290K is the budget, and the 152 is the actual expenses.
Correct.
And is there someone that can easily run down, like, I'm assuming these are fund numbers, and what each represents?
Sure, I can do that. They're I'm going to focus on the second data set called object. So if you see at the very top, it says fund, object, resource, goal, function, location, management code. At the top, there's a label. So let's ignore the fund because all of this is happening within the general fund. So 010, so it's everything related to the board's expenditures is in the general fund. The next set of category of numbers is called object. Object defines the type of expenditure, so we'll just focus on that one. So 2,900 is salary, so that represents the board stipend. The next set of objects, starting with the 3,000 category, is a reflection of the statutory taxes and benefits related to your stipends and your health insurance. So the biggest one in the 3,000 category is your health insurance. So board members have access to health insurance. That's the one that 3402. So you can see this year, the expected expenditure at the end of June is $61,409.34. That represents your health insurance. And then moving down to 4,300, that's supplies. 5,200 is your travel conference expenditures, any mileage, travel registration for the conferences that you guys attend, your hotels, meals, etc. 5,300 is membership fees. This would be to ACCBE. I believe you have an item on the agenda for that next in this meeting. The 257 categories are a reflection of room rentals, so every board meeting that you access the boardroom or this room this morning, there's a room charge. So that's the fees associated with using the rooms. And then 5,800 is professional services. Those expenditures there represent access to board docs. There's a fee for the software, so that's charged there. Also, what would be charged there in the future is your elections costs. There's a professional service related to the countywide election for your trustee election that you'll have later on in this year. The next item is 5,804. That is representative of any legal expenses. There's a current budget of $10,000 for this year. You haven't had legal expenses most recently in years, but there was an invoice that's not reflected here for the month of May. The total was $12,000 something for the bill for the board's attorney that you've been using. So it's not reflected in there yet because it's in the process of getting paid. 5,902 is communications. I think that's an old budget line, probably shouldn't be there anymore, but you've got $100 associated with 5,902.
Can I ask, so with room rental, it's broken down into 5711 and 5715. I'm assuming 15 is for the actual room. 11 would be...
11 is print shop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5711 is the graphics department, so if there were any copies associated with the board, which we usually just take care of that. There's really not very many expenditures that would go through on that.
And just to be clear, the 3302, that's taxes and that's taxes. The health benefit is 3402. 3302.
It's taxes associated with your stipend payment.
Okay.
But we can define exactly which one. You would have a Medicare, you would have a unemployment tax, you would have workers' comp.
That's Medicare. 3302 is Medicare, 3502 is state unemployment, and 3602 is workers' comp.
Okay. Got it. So those are all, the 3502, 3602, those are also taxes.
Yeah, it's a percentage of the stipend paid. It's It's part of the payroll function. And it's on the employer side. On your stipend, you also have the employee side withheld out of your stipend payments.
And then the 4,300 for, there's like a 2,000, but we only seem to use a bit of that. What is that?
Supplies.
Oh, that's supplies, okay. And then the 5,200 would be travel, correct?
Yes. And everything associated with travel. Mileage, meals, hotel, registration for that conference.
And can I just ask why it's always struck me as curious that we pay to rent the room even though technically the facilities are under the Board of Education?
That's how we run our maintenance and operations for the facilities of the conference room. It's a true expense, so we don't just charge across all programs and all expenditures, we charge based on use. It's part of what's in the accounting manual. You can charge for facilities, conference, like general space, lots of different ways. This organization chose a long time ago to charge as used. You can charge a flat fee, like indirect is charged a flat fee, 9% to all programs, not based on how many times they have an accounts payable transaction or anything, it's just a flat fee. But the maintenance and operations cost of the conference facility rooms and the general space that everybody has access to is charged based on use.
And I'm assuming that's just any department that uses these spaces, it's charged to that department in some
Or
way.
anybody from outside of the organization.
Thank you for that.
Madam President,
Yes, Trustee
I
Flores.
just trying to get clarification. Ms. Key, on 5,800 elections, the 24 versus 26, there's a significant difference. Is that because one year there was 3 trustees that were up and this year's 2 trustees?
There are no charges yet in there. If you want the detail of what those expenses are, we can provide you the detail. But you haven't had an election in this fiscal year yet. 25, 26.
Madam President, I looked at some of the budget from 25, 26, and I think the budget list is about $325K. Here it's listed as 290. Was there a post, June adjustment of our budget?
This particular report is not including an indirect line, so I'm guessing indirect is probably the difference. Right, Lisa?
Maybe I looked at the wrong line, but
I mean, are you saying why did it go up from 24, 25 to 25, 26?
no, what I have in 24, 25, it was 316 and some change. And then 25, 26, it's 325 and some change in, I think, our June approval of the total budget. I might have read the wrong line here, but I just don't know why there might be a delta.
No, Misty's totally correct. There's a 7,300 line that doesn't usually show up on expenditure reports because it's indirect. It's considered outside
Okay,
your normal expenditures.
okay, thank you.
Trustee Lucas.
If you could, I chicken scratched on this report, but if we could get an email with all the different line items and their association, so I can have it, that would be great.
so Madam President,
In an email or something like that.
the work that the committee's doing, Trustees Teasdale and Lucas, if they come back to us with a recommendation for the forensics work and then a separate recommendation for the quarterly or whatever the figures happens to be, would those costs come out of the 5,800, the professional services?
Ed Code gives the board to take any compensation, any funds that are available in the Ed Code. I think one of the reasons we want to have a discussion this morning is to try to put that, try to foresee as much as the expenses as we can in the coming fiscal year, so we can be as clear as possible. And I have some estimates about some of the costs that we have. When the time comes, I'll share where I got those and the thinking behind it.
Because just a reminder, also, I'm looking at legal services, just a reminder to the board, in the next school year, I believe we have 5 charter schools that are up for review. Renewal. So I anticipate having some sort of legal support for that as well. So just know that there's going to be additional legal fees that potentially could be here.
Have we historically had more legal when these charters come up for renewal?
It's been 5 years, ma'am. At that point,
All right, so again, this item is to discuss what our current budget is and what should this fund for the board be in 26-27, which is something that I feel we need to work with staff on.
Madam President, if you like, I can give a sort of notion from the work the committee has done so far on potential cost of a forensic audit, as well as an ongoing fiscal control, and other potential expenses that might be incurred by some of the recent decisions we've made to conduct a forensic audit. I've talked to probably 15 or 18, I think, different firms, law firms and audit firms. I've talked extensively to FICMAT about this, who've been wonderful in their counseling of us on this. They cannot get involved because they fear conflict of interest. Even though the superintendent has left the board, they fear that there's an ongoing attachment there that could lead them to be perceived as having a conflict. That's unfortunate because if FICMAT had done this, there's a possibility of us being reimbursed for all the expenses. So we will have to go outside to a private firm. From various sources, I've gone through the scope of what we want. We've tried to sort of limit that, sort of get that balance between trying to get a thorough investigation of what went on so we can answer the questions of what went on, what was the process, who was involved, why was there silence for so long, and at the same time, keep it a reasonable expense. What I'm hearing from several sources is a range anywhere from $150 to $300K to conduct such an audit. So that's very expensive. I'm recommending that we do, put aside that amount of money for the forensic audit, because I do think this whole event has undermined trust in the County Office of Education, and we need to make sure that we understand what went on, why it went on, and come up with, bylaws or actions or processes to ensure it doesn't repeat. I also took the liberty of what it might involve getting an ongoing fiscal control, and depending on what we want, that could be, let's say, to the end of the year, between 30 and 50K. Depending on how often we want that person to come in. I'm putting 50K as the height of that. And I'm making a rough estimate, and this is only concerned with our actions around recent incidents here. Other potential expenses, which could be lawyers, or maybe other bylaws we put in place that could involve cost, I put down 50K. Just as a sort of miscellaneous fund, because we don't know what we're going to find, we don't know what bylaws we might need to put up, or what other actions we might need to take that would involve costs. So I'm suggesting sort of $250K for the forensic audit, $50K for the ongoing physical control, and other potential expenses of $50K, for a total of $350K, which I would add on to the existing budget that we've had in the past years. So what we have in the paper given out is $290, or what was in last year's report of $325. So That would be in addition to those expenses. I actually think we need to be really good stewards of the money here, but I also think we need to, we have a duty to ourselves, to our role in oversight and transparency. That is our constitutional role here, to ensure that we get at the key of what happened, why it happened, to be able to stop it from repeating. And I believe this is a good balance between being mindful of the expenses and trying to be as thorough as possible.
Well, thank you for that work. Fellow board members, question?
I'll just add on one thing, because I'm sort of anticipating a question. We are looking at sending out an RFP. We want at least 3 viable people. We're starting to do a triage among those that have we've already talked to, and we want to shortlist 3, and with them we'll get an RFP out and some quotes, some specific quotes back to us. So sorry.
Discussion?
Madam President?
Trustee Flores?
First, I want to thank Trustee Teasdale and Trustee Lucas for taking on this effort. I get it. You guys have day jobs and lives and all that kind of stuff, so thank you for the work.
Well, thank God I'm retired, Trustee Flores.
I heard some people are failures in retirement. I hope to be one of those. But that's what I say. Thank you for the work. Again, and this is me coming from an outsider. I'm not trying to guide you or anything. I just want to share a perspective. Again, in my day job, we do what are called after-action reports all the time. Comes from the military, we do exercises and then try to figure out what happened, and then we implement that into our civilian sector. So our approach is very simple. We look at what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, why was there a difference? And so if that's not how you're looking, I would recommend or ask you kind of take that approach. I think that will help you guide your overall approach a little bit better in terms of tasking for whoever vendor we end up going with. Because again, I'm all about let's figure out what happened, what corrective action, and then moving forward.
That's the attitude that I'm trying to take. You know, what happened, what should have happened, how can we avoid it? You know?
Going in the future.
So the next logical thing for me would be to ask staff, is this feasible to add to the 26-27 budget?
Yes, can we be clear on the total? I couldn't follow you. You mentioned lots of numbers. I just want to be clear on the total. So what total do you want to
So
add?
the total would be $350K for the investigation and possible next steps, added to the ongoing budget. Now, last year we had 325, you know, so it would be added to the budget as it stands as you proposed, plus the 350 for this investigation for next year. So probably what, about almost 700K.
I did the math.
We can add 350. Even though the budget work is done, we'll add it to the document that you're being presented.
Great. Do we need a vote for that, or is that included in the budget vote?
Yeah, I would ask this a question on,
Yeah.
I was a little surprised to see the attorney that has been working with the board is already at $12,000. Do we know, is that being charged for actual work, or is it part of a retainer monthly, or
I think it
how is
was-
that being charged? And this seems, for how much I've actually seen it, like quite a bit.
I think it was hourly, and I think part of it was the board meetings probably were an expense. And the time that they were sitting, whether they were actually working or not, they still bill us for.
But there's no retainer monthly.
So, yeah, unfortunately, it's that, plus the additional attorneys. So, yeah, there is expense, sadly, which we would like to avoid in the future.
Yeah, I do want to mention this 350, again, it's an estimate given what was mentioned. I know by Ed Code, we do have the right to have access to any available funds, but of course, I want to keep this down as low as possible. And the other thing, trying to keep it minimum, focusing on a certain group. I'll be very clear, it's the superintendent and his direct reports, some of their expenses and some of the vendor areas and their salaries, because that's where we've received some indications that there might have been some mismanagement. I want to keep it there, to keep it as inexpensive as possible, and not go on a fishing trip into the whole organization.
And Madam President, the source of these funds, I'm guessing, will be the general fund?
Wait, repeat that, please?
Where's the money coming from?
Where's the money coming from? Well, that's why we asked this to you. So that's why it's important that we put this into the budget. As far as I'm concerned, we as a board also need to be held accountable, and so I want all of the expenses that we incur to be in our budget, so it's very transparent as well. What are we doing with the public's money? How are we using it, right? So I think it was important to add this in prior to adopting next year's budget. So what the result of what we are doing is going to be included in the budget very clearly.
So I'm going to take this opportunity to say, when we look at our travel for conferences, as a reminder, Trustee Teasdale was former Director, County at Large, representing this county. Trustee Kidd is Delegate Assembly Trustee representing this county. I am currently Director at Large at CSBA representing this county. So I don't want the public to see a large travel number without the context of we're doing statewide work. We're representing Ventura County, I've been honestly.
And thank you for that. That is important to remember, that I value the time spent by our board members because that is not compensated. So, so the travel is more, but I also want to add that the board members are not paid any additional sums, which is a lot of time and effort, because I've done that as well. And so thank you for your time spent on representing our board and the state at that level. So, okay, we've talked about the budget. It sounds like it can be included in, and we will see that accounted for in 26, 27. Any more discussion on this item? I don't know if we need to make a motion or anything, because we're going to be seeing the budget, the LCAP and the budget in the coming weeks, and then we'll vote on approving the budget. So I don't know that we need to actually have a motion on this.
No, but just an observation as we move forward and as the committee continues to do their work, I would like to have some form of reporting out on what are the costs that we are incurring.
I think Trustee Teasdale did add that after they interview the 3 viable people and they get quotes, that can be reported back out in a regular board meeting, which I believe this committee is planning to do anyways.
Yeah, our effort is to move as quickly as possible, but thoroughly. And I think our goal would be to come out with a preferred vendor out of the RFP, and giving everyone sort of an overview of cost and the quality from our perspective, what we've understood. So probably ask at that point for a board vote to approve or disapprove or move on. Does that make sense?
So any further comments on C2? All right, also a budgetary item. included in this is C3, which is renewal of ACCBE dues and fees. That is also coming up. It's not a small sum, so felt that we should discuss this before moving forward.
I guess my question for everyone on the board is, how is everybody taking advantage of these webinars or services by the ACCBE? Have people attended?
So me personally, I have not, because I have been engaged with CSBA and their county board services group. I have supported a couple others webinars related to the county governance handbook. This is the one coming up very briefly. As director at large, I've been using that platform to get word out to other county board members up and down the state. But as far as ACCBE, the only opportunity I had that I wanted to take advantage of was the conference where Dr. Morales was giving one of the keynote presentations. Unfortunately, I had a conflict that I cannot conflict. But I guess the question I would ask is, given the cost, and given that we have CSBA over to us, and we're already paying that fee, what are we getting from ACCBE that we are not getting from CSBA?
Well, what's interesting, CSBA does not charge us any, or hopefully, because I know when I was on the board, we decided this, that there's no additional fee for counties, as there used to be beforehand. So yeah, the question is do we have any added value from ACCBE? Anybody else want to speak to that at this time? Are we any?
Yeah, I've had, I believe, a chance to attend maybe one or two, but personally, I would be inclined to, based on the costs that we've already talked about this morning, not renewing it at this time.
What is the cost? I've attended several of their Zooms. One of the things, or their webinars, one of the things I like is that they're archived. So if I'm at work during the day, I'm still signed up for it, I got access to it, but I can view it later. And like I just pulled up the folder, and I mean, there's literally dozens of different trainings that they've offered. So I do feel there's value there, but we want to be good stewards of the public dollars. So.
Yeah, I'll share my perspective. They have been, the contacts at ACCBE have been helpful in the last 2 or 3 weeks of getting contacts, getting referrals. That has been very useful. It also might be useful going forward if we do decide to build new bylaws, to work with being able to find out other counties, but we probably get that through CSBA also. So I frankly am a little bit skeptical about whether we're getting the value. I think it's interesting that Trustee Lucas, the newest, has used it the most. That seems to me making a lot of sense. Something we should not disregard in our decision of whether to go forward or not.
Again, I'm sorry, Madam President, didn't mean to cut you off. And I get it, we all have, different pools on our energies. To me, one of the big benefits of being with CSBA is their annual fall conference. Mr. Lucas, I totally understand difficulties in getting to Monterey and whatnot, but if you are able to at some point in your 4 years or further, I highly recommend that, because not just the content of the conference, but the networking. To Mr. Teasdale's point, thanks without aging myself. I can go up and down the state, and there's a number of trustees that I can ping on, whether it's a rural question, a community school question, a special ed question, whatever the questions are. There's a whole networking that are available to us, and you build those relationships within person. I totally understand the need for archiving this and that. I get it 100%. But you just cannot put a value on that personal contact and the relationship that you build over time.
Yeah, I guess it's going to be in Marina Del Rey in September, so I'm already scheduled to be there, so I'm looking forward to it.
So I've gone through a lot of their online webinars, whether live or later look through it. I don't know if I've had a $4,200 value out of it, but many of the board members and the people at ACCBE are people I highly respect and have worked with at CSBA and the board of directors for a number of years, and I applaud their commitment to county boards in California, and I appreciate that they're trying to bring a different perspective, because although, you know, I attended CSBA's county conference last September in Monterey, and I felt like it was a little bit of an infomercial going on, not gonna lie. I wasn't sure that it had the value for the expense. I'm gonna give it another try. In Marina Del Rey, it's more local. That being said, I kind of am not opposed to giving ACCBE another year. I want to support this organization, and I want to give it a little bit more time than 1 year. That's just me personally, but I'm happy to go along with what the majority of the board feels.
Well, I'd like them to make a motion that we renew for 1 year and reconsider, 12 months from now.
I would second that.
Just a quick point, that was the perspective we took a year ago when we went down this road. They're new, they have a lot of energy. Personally, I thought they were understaffed, but that's quite all right. My whole point was, is this ever sustainable? And the conversation we had a year ago was, let's give it a year, and then let's see what they look like a year from now. And now we're saying, let's give it another year, so where are we going to be next year? Just an observation.
I guess one of the reasons I'm tending for renewal is given what we're going through right now and not knowing what might be some of the actions, the connections through ACCBE might be useful in finding a best practice somewhere. That's maybe an addition for me for wanting to try 1 more year, put that into the pot.
I totally hear you, Trustee Teasdale, but those connections are there. We've built them over time, whether HCCB exists or not. You know, the trustees up and down the state, we have those connections already.
I agree with that, but I have to say that the latter part of this year, ACCBE was actually having more conferences like in Riverside, and I think that that they are ramping up a little bit more than they were in the beginning of the last year that we were looking at this. And so I kind of want to explore where they're going to go this coming year, and it may be a better organization in the long run than what CSBA is providing county boards. I don't know.
Well, I'm moved by the fact that our newest trustee is taking advantage. So that's why I'm willing to support this motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, so there's a motion to continue with ACCBE for another year. I think it's okay to review this every year and have a discussion on the value. So with that in place, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
So the motion passes 4-1 with Trustee Kidd opposing. And with that, we do not have any board members' comments or anything additional, because we will all be seeing each other in a little over a week. I believe our next meeting is Friday, June 18th from 8 to 10 a.m. Yes?